Vauban, the frame that always felt like he should be incredible, but somehow managed to feel like you were micromanaging a construction site mid-combat, cycling mines, flashbanging yourself.
Hey, you're finally awake.
Watching Tesla Nervos roll off into the sunset instead of doing anything useful, and then DE decided to retouch him. And I'm not gonna lie, this feels less like a retouch and more like somebody finally let Vauban cook. So today we're breaking down what's changed, what's actually insane about him now, and whether our beloved train frame has officially entered S tier territory. Let us begin. Before we dive into everything, the big question is where to actually get Vauban. Base Vauban is quite simple to get. Pop on over to Nightwave and you can get all of his base parts here for Nightwave credits. And they are really cheap to build too. And his blueprint you can pick up directly from the market. If you don't want to spend your hard-earned Nightwave credits, then you could also wait for base Vauban to come onto the normal Devuri circuit. All Warframes here work on a weekly rotation, so Vauban should come in at week 4. Vauban Prime is a whole different kettle of fish entirely. At the time of making this video, you will be able to spend some ire to get all the relics that contain his parts through Primed Resurgence. Building his Prime set can be on the expensive side, as his systems requires 9k cryotic, and I know how much we all love excavation missions, so good luck to you. If you decide to pick him up after this is done, he will go back into the Prime Vault. So you might face some hefty platinum costs in the market, but with his retouch, it is absolutely worth the investment if you can afford it. Quick pause, Tenno. Before we dive in properly, if you've been enjoying the content lately, consider subscribing and liking the video. We are ridiculously close to 1,000 Tenno, and last I checked, subscribing still costs 0 platinum. Thank you so much, back to the video. Vauban's passive causes you to deal 1.25 times more damage to enemies who are incapacitated. This bonus damage is multiplicative. In the case of Vauban's passive, incapacitated refers to either an electricity proc from Tesla Nervos, which was included in his rework, being tangled by your tether flechette mines, and finally, either being lifted or pulled in by Bastille. Enemies that are knocked down, staggered, or suffer things like panic from heat procs do not count as incapacitated. His first ability, Tesla Nervos, sends out these little rollerballs that follow you around and attach to nearby enemies, of which you can only have 4 active at any given time. Once attached, they will immediately shock the target, stunning them and periodically dealing electricity damage to them, keeping them in place as long as the drone is attached. Additionally, every second they will release a burst of electricity damage to all enemies within a radius. At base, this burst has a 50% status chance that, with his latest ability Retouch, can now be increased with ability Strength. Each Nervos does have limited charges though, which can be increased by modding for ability duration, although this isn't that big of a deal as you will most likely be spamming these out a lot anyway. If a target dies while it has a Nervos attached to them, they will simply just pop off and roll around to find a new target. Compared to the past, these little bastards are significantly better with their AI targeting now. They will prioritize enemies that are further away to maximize your impact across the map, and will now also target enemies that are ragdolled by your Bastille Vortex ability. This helps a lot when using the augment for this ability, which we will go through in a second. You can also hold down the ability to charge it up, allowing you to toss out all 4 drones at once at no additional energy cost, which makes it a very energy efficient ability. However, be warned that if you deploy new drones, it will replace the currently active ones. On its own, Tesla Nervos is an okay ability. It's its augment, Tesla Bank, that truly makes this ability shine the way it was intended. When using Tesla Bank, Tesla Nervos' drones will convert the current health of the target into an 8-meter burst of electricity when killed. Said health value is calculated upon when they first attach to their target and works per Nervos drone. So each drone that is attached onto one target can have their own explosion, and we cannot influence this with ability Strength, however. With this augment, Tesla Nervos turns into a very effective clear ability, as they will just keep moving in between targets and following you around, allowing you to nuke pretty much anything in the vicinity. With his retouch, it is so much easier to keep track of which target currently has a Nervos on them. Slotting in Tesla Bank will now display a marker above enemies that currently have a Nervos attached, which is a really nice QOL. That said, this augment works great on targets that are already armor stripped, so be sure to make use of your Bastille ability to strip armor or just do it some other way. It works okay with armored targets, but remember that even if the target has a really high base health pool, the damage dealt to surrounding enemies will still be reduced because of armor. Another thing that works really well is if you have a companion that is effectively priming with viral or heat, to maximize the amount of damage that Tesla Bank can do. This ability is also Vauban's subsumed ability, which means any other frame can get access to the absolutely broken damage of Tesla Bank. One of my biggest gripes with the old Vauban is that we had to cycle between 4 different mines, which frankly got a bit much sometimes. Now with his retouch, we only have 2 mines for us to deal with that are a combination of the previous 4 mines, and oh my goodness, I love this change. First we have the Tether Flechette mine, which as you probably guessed is a combination of the old Tether and Flechette mines. Tapping the ability will throw out the Tether Flechette mine, which will deploy wherever it lands. This mine will fling out wires that will tether up to 2 enemies at a time, ragdolling them and pulling them towards it. It will only do this to enemies that the mine has line of sight to and is useful to bring enemies into your Bastille field. The same mine will also fire out nails randomly in all directions around the mine, dealing both puncture and slash damage alongside a forced puncture effect, which scales with its own critical chance of 50%, a 2x crit multi, and roughly 5% status chance. Now, this mine's damage will scale directly with enemy level, and as far as I am aware, it is a multiplicative scaling, so this mine's damage will not be left behind in higher level play and can very easily nuke level caps just simply by existing. Second to this, the nails from the Tether Flechette mine can hit weak points, but this will be reliant on how you place the mine. Holding down the ability will throw out the Vector Overdrive mine, which, as its name implies, combines both the effects of the Vector Pad and the Overdrive mines. This mine will drop arrows facing in the direction that you throw it in. Any allies that run over the pad while facing this direction will be launched forward at quite a speed. At base, this is 25 meters per second, which can be sped up by modding for ability duration. This launch can come in handy in some situations. You can use it to keep enemies away from key objectives, like the consoles in interception missions, for example, propel enemies to your current location, or to get around the map significantly quicker. Unlike players, enemies who cross over the pad will be flung in the direction that it's facing, regardless of whether they are already moving in that direction in the first place. However, be careful with how you position these because you can very easily throw yourself or your allies over a ledge by accident. Additionally, when moving over these pads, both allies and yourself will gain increased movement speed and a multiplicative damage buff, which are both also affected by ability strength. The damage buff functions like Mirage's Eclipse ability and can also buff your companion's damage as well, so it is a very good one to have. I found that to get around accidentally flying all over the place, placing the pad facing a nearby wall or an object will allow you to get your buffs without traveling too far. Alternatively, you can sort of get around the momentum boost by sliding or rolling over the pad when you move over it. Kind of like a slide cancel, however I find it's not always consistent, so the wall method works best for me. Next is Photon Strike, Vauban's very own Helldiver stratagem. Photon Strike throws out a beacon that brings down an orbital cannon strike where the beacon strikes an enemy, dealing blast damage which scales directly with enemy levels and ragdolling enemies within the radius of the strike. With Vauban's retouch, Photon Strike now deals 2 times more damage to overguarded enemies, forces a blast status proc on them, and now also enjoys increased blast radius. Photon Strike's beacon will be attracted to your Bastille Vortex, which helps with some easier targeting. Not that it will be hard for you, as the Vortex already bundles everything up for you. This ability used to be the one that most players subsumed off of Vauban. In the past, it was okay at best, and all it was really good for was flashbanging yourself and your teammates. Thankfully, they did reduce the flashbang effect so we can actually see what we're doing. Now with his recent retouch and also its augment, Photon Repeater, this ability is viable. Still not stupidly crazy, but doable. While using Photon Repeater, if the Photon Strike hits at least 5 targets, the next cast will cost no energy, and will fire 2 additional Photon Strikes. This means you can rain orbital bombardments across the map with very little consequence, especially if you have something like Bright Bonnet subsumed, then it's free stratagems for everyone. Moving on to Bastille, Vauban's Fortress of Solitude, which got a lot of love during his recent retouch. A noticeable change is that it now has no enemy cap, which we will see why it's so good in a second. Casting Bastille will throw out a device that will create a containment field in a radius around wherever it lands. Enemies that are caught in this containment field will be suspended in mid-air. Any armored enemies, whether or not they are currently suspended within this field, will have a percentage of their armor permanently stripped from them per second. Once their armor is stripped, they will still remain suspended for as long as the containment field is active. Simultaneously, both you and your allies that are within this containment field will receive armor every 0.2 seconds. This is influenced by how many enemies are currently being held by Bastille's containment field, with enemies that are armored granting 2 times more armor than other enemies. This armor bonus caps out at 1500 armor and will have infinite duration as long as you remain within the field. Stepping out of it will put the buff on a timer, which can simply be refreshed by moving back into a Bastille field. Once the Bastille's duration runs out, the containment field will collapse into a vortex. This vortex will constantly ragdoll enemies and pulls in all enemies that enter the original containment field's range, dealing magnetic damage per second with a 40% status chance. You don't have to wait for the Bastille to collapse in order to trigger a vortex. Simply hold down the ability key, which is by default 4, to throw out a device to trigger a vortex. If there are multiple Bastille containment fields currently up and within range of each other, holding down the ability key will collapse all of them into one vortex, dragging any enemies with them. This thing does such a good job at locking down areas. It pulls in pickups for you, it brings enemies to your door, and helps with survivability because Vauban can be a little squishy at the best of times. Now its augment, Enduring Bastille, is really good if you are playing missions where you want to lock down a specific area for a long time, which is like 95% of Vauban's playstyle anyway. While using Enduring Bastille, killing enemies inside the containment field extends its duration by 2 seconds at base, and this is affected by ability duration. Additionally, your vortex duration is increased by 70% of its max duration for each additional vortex thrown into it. So if you play your cards right, you can keep both Bastille and your vortexes going for a long while. One thing I should mention is that you don't only have to have Bastille or vortex active. You could cast a vortex or 2 and then throw down some Bastille containment fields, and you will get the best of both worlds. You can have 4 of each in any case, so go wild. Alrighty Tenno, it is build time. These are builds that I have found to be fun or just the most straightforward and effective, so I would encourage you to use mine as a template and tailor it to suit your preferred playstyle. The first step would be the Archon shards that I use for these builds. I kind of wish we had a way to configure loadouts for these, but it is what it is. We are using 1 amber shard for casting speed, 3 red shards for strength, and 1 red shard for duration. These won't change over the builds that we will go through. The first one is a solid no Helminth build. In light of his recent retouch, his abilities are pretty good as is, although Photon Strike could be a little better. That said, there are potential subsume options that would work really well with this build in particular, which we will go through in a second. Because most of Vauban's abilities scale off of enemy level, high strength numbers aren't super necessary on Vauban. we will be using the new Tesla Bank augment to turn our Tesla Nervoses into health-based nukes, which, you guessed it, isn't influenced by ability strength at all. This augment has turned Tesla Nervos into a stupidly strong clear ability, so I wanted to capitalize on that. So instead, we will focus more on ability range, followed by some duration. Having high amounts of range means your Nervos drone's electricity bursts will have a radius of roughly 14 meters if you build it the way that I do. Your tether mines will be able to snag targets from 47 meters away. And of course, we can't forget about our Bastilles, which will have a radius of 23.5 meters per Bastille. And considering that Vauban's entire kit is built around CC and general map control, the more range that we have, the more effective and also the safer we will be. Archon Stretch is a must because Vauban can be a very spammy frame by nature, so the electricity procs from our Nervos drones will help with some energy regen. This will be supported by Equilibrium, which works really well because Bastille's Vortex will bring energy and health pickups straight to your door. In the aura slot, I have growing power in here for a little bit of extra strength. This is more for our overdrive damage buff and slightly quicker armor stripping from our Bastilles, but you can change this out for something else if you preferred. In the Exilus slot, usually I like to run Mobilize for general movement speed. If you don't care too much for more parkour velocity, which I recommend you should, then you could put something else like Cunning Drift in for a little bit of extra range or whatever you preferred. It's not really going to drastically affect the build in any way. Alrighty, it's time for the arcanes. Before you freak out, yes, I do have Arcane Hotshot in here. This is because Vauban's Flechette mines are affected by the critical chance buff from Hotshot, and it makes them deal disgusting damage. But we have no heat, you say. That's an easy fix. I like to use a Sentinel with Artax so I can prime for both heat, cold, and viral at the same time. If you don't have Arcane Hotshot, which I would understand because it's either stupidly expensive or just takes forever to farm, then you could easily swap it out for Malt Augmented, which won't be super noticeable, but it'll still help, or whatever else you prefer. Finally, our trusty Arcane Circumvent. Despite all the armor that we can get from Bastille, Vauban has about as much tankiness as a piece of paper. Circumvent does a really good job at keeping us alive and preventing us from being hit with nasty status effects. All in all, I found that this general build works extremely well for just about all situations and is pretty comfortable to play. But before we move on to the next build, here are some ways in which you can customize this one even further. If you want to be lazy or if you plan on sitting in one spot for a while, then you could easily make use of Enduring Bastille to keep your Bastille and Vortex going as long as you can. We can swap out Flow, then slot in a blue shard for some energy. Then if we keep Equilibrium, you should be okay because your Bastilles will last much longer, so you will cost them less. If you want to take it a step further, then you can subsume Bright Bonnet over your Photon Strike to help with energy sustain. If you wanted to turn this build into a more agile version of Vauban, then you can subsume Breach Surge over Photon Strike. Breach Surge's damage multiplier coupled with Tesla Nervos's Tesla Bank augment is devastating. The rest of the mods can pretty much just stay as is. This one is nice if you find yourself moving around the map a lot, but at the end of the day, it comes down to your preference. This build I like to call the Orbital Bombardment build. Vauban's Photon Strike ability got some love with his retouch, so I wanted to see if it was worth building around it specifically. And it's turned out to be fun for some situations. This build doesn't change too much from the original one, aside from it having more strength and less range. We drop Overextended and exchange it with Photon Repeater for free Orbital Strikes. Enduring Bastille because the longer our vortexes stay up, the more enemies we can hit and the more free strikes we can throw out. We subsume Bright Bonnet over our Nervoses, which is a huge gamble, I know. In exchange, we get infinite energy sustain and some additional ability strength, which directly helps our Photon Strike. The caveat with this build is that it's very much a this is my corner and this is where I shall stay kind of playstyle. When you toss out a Photon Strike beacon, it tends to yeet itself towards the closest vortex, so keeping enemies tightly grouped in choke points will do wonders if you choose to play this build. Vauban's retouch, which has felt more like a rework in some cases, has left me wanting to just play this frame all the time now. Before, I struggled to get into playing him because personally I always felt he was janky and just annoying. Now I can confidently say he has become an S tier frame for sure, at least in my eyes. I know there are some players out there who have played Vauban religiously and know him inside and out, so if there's anything that my ADHD brain has missed, put it in the comments so others can learn. Thank you so much for watching to the end. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe. We are so close to 1,000 subs, and your support helps way more than you think. Until next time, stay safe, Tenno, and I shall see you in the next one.